Hi, Bill Henshaw here again from Constitutional Coop headquarters. And we're just at a particular moment in time where the federal moratorium eviction could expire. That's not yet clear. Even if it does, I would expect that some emergency, quote unquote, action will be taken, perhaps by Biden acting as uh, with executive orders as commander in chief of the armed forces. What else is new in this damn de facto government? But that said, there are very effective ways to deal with this situation if it arises. And I'd like to explain some of them to you here so that you can, figure out what you might do if in the event push comes to shove, as they say. That said, the way I do things is not like anyone else does them, and certainly not any state bar association attorneys you're going to run across. But we would be taking astounding positions, at least at first blush. For example, no landlord-tenant relationship, and this is because that the relationship and the quote-unquote payment of rent, which you have yet to make a rent payment. We'll talk more about that later. You discharge the obligation, but it's done in undefined dollars. We don't know what the hell they are, but they should be as gold and silver coin. Article 1, Section 10, no state shall make anything but gold or silver coin to tender and payment of debt. And Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 authorizes the Congress, to uh, do coinage and and regulate the values thereof. Not the exact language, but coin money and regulate the value thereof. It's not there. What we have are Federal Reserve notes, otherwise known as evidences of debt, otherwise known as undefined dollars. We don't know what the hell they are. So if, for example, a landlord will want to bring a case against you for non-payment of the rent, it's not possible since they can't define dollar. This is precisely the same situation you get into with the de facto courts, especially traffic courts, but other ones. Anytime they demand any payment of anything, what I did, God, 19 years ago, I can't believe, I got quote unquote convicted in a traffic case. It's a long, interesting story about that for another video. And okay, so I got convicted and they let me know the amount of the fine. So I went down with my sweetie to the clerk of court with some rolls of silver quarters. And I said, "Hi, I'm here to pay the fine. How many of these will it take to do it?" And the clerk looked at me and said, "Well, I don't know." And she went away for a couple of minutes and came back, said, "We can only accept them at face value. Silver coins." The same would be true for gold, by the way, if you're wondering about that. And I said, "Fine, I anticipated this. Go ahead and sign this document," which she did, admitting what she just said. And I promptly fired off a copy of that to the local dumbass down here in Deadwood and demanded to be prosecuted for a willful failure to pay. Out here, I think that's section 40508 of the California Vehicle Code. 19 years later, I'm still waiting. Ain't gonna happen, folks. They can't define dollar. They can't prosecute you for willfully paying something you don't know what the hell it is. Not only that, but these undefined dollars circulate in commerce, which is admiralty jurisdiction, which state courts can't exercise. We have the same argument against landlords, quote unquote landlords. And it gets even better with corporate landlords. These are the bastards that we really want to go after because they're not registered to do business, for example, here in Sacramento, because we can prove, stunningly, we can prove. And by the way, you send a request for documents to me, uwinnincourt@gmail.com, and I'll send you information on my materials, including the first 5 pages of my 83-page unopposed brief on admission of new states. The situation is that the corporations, even if they exist and they don't, are registered with the territorial secretary of state. We, as at least lawful de jure jus sanguinis state citizens and or inhabitants of states and maybe even inhabitants of territories, are in judicial districts in a state. As such, we're entitled to judicial courts from day one, and there are none of those that exist. Bottom line is they can't compel us into their jurisdiction, but we sure as hell can compel them into ours. You'll learn more about that later too, exactly how that works. So they're not registered to do business. They have no standing. Not only does that make their service of process void from day one, it's void anyway, because when you serve process, you have to understand, people, that the secret intention of the 14th Amendment. No one who ratified this outside the secret committee of 15 in the Congress and the New York banksters at 120 Broadway, New York, knew the secret intent was to make citizens out of corporations. What I call these days birthright citizens. That's what it was set out to do, and nobody that ratified it had a clue. Where's the consent of the governed here? Ain't. Even if they exist, they don't exist. And that's a big deal for us because, that being the case, when you serve corporations and they treat us as corporate citizens, by the way, we have exactly the same citizenship that these corporations do. Okay. What we do is demand that they serve our designated agent for service of process in the quote unquote state capital. But wouldn't you know, we don't have one and we don't need one, do we? And yet you get to the Supreme Court of the United States, and most of what I preach comes from these 9 parts. And there's a well-known case called Penoria v. Neff. They may even be still teaching this one in these law schools these days. Who the hell knows? 95 U.S. 714, Penoria v. Neff, effective service process. Now, I'm sure back in the 1880s when this decision came down, they didn't have a clue about how it might ultimately be used, but that doesn't matter. Because if you're going to serve a corporate entity and get them into your forum, you have to serve a designated agent. If you don't do that, number one, how the hell did we, the victims of all this crap going on with the 14th Amendment and all these War Powers Acts, how do we know we're being treated as a corporation? And how do we know that we have to respond to it accordingly? In other words, challenge it and put in a motion to dismiss. And I got a butte 41 pages that they can't answer 2 paragraphs of. Send me information. Send me an email. youwinnincourt@gmail.com. I'll send you more information about what I have on hand. It's absolutely stunning, and especially with today's unprecedented turn of events here, that gives us a real window of opportunity for the first time in over a century to make some real progress and assert rights secured by the Constitution, which instinctively you know you have, but there doesn't seem to be any way to do it. That's where all my decades of intense, passionate, and independent study of the Constitution, laws, and history of the United States comes into play. Not only I believe we can, but I believe that the 904s are now prepared when they come back from their summer vacation to start seriously doing their job to say what the law is for the first time in 150 years. If that starts to happen, we can make just an astounding amount of headway against these corporate entities, the New York banksters, the internationalists, who knows, the trilateralists, people like that, the City of London, Vatican City. Get them the hell out of here. This is the one nation on earth ever created where we actually have the power to do that, you and I. I mean, think about that. This Constitution was established to ensure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Not Microsoft, Bill Gates, not New York banksters, not IBM, us. There are agents, and when you understand that relationship, principal and agent, we tell them what the hell to do, not the other way around. You just have to get that in your mind and learn, how to understand it. And by the way, I didn't get it overnight either. When it all finally came together for me, I said, my God, why didn't they teach me any of this 50 years ago in high school? When, in my case, right outside of Washington, D.C., who knows what the consequences of that would have been. But better late than never. I've learned it. I can pass it on to you. Send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. I'll tell you how to get started. I'll be with you every step of the way with email support, complimentary phone consultations, and even a complimentary Zoom appearance at a contested hearing. All that comes with the package and it's very modestly priced. It really is at less than 25 cents a page. about maybe 1% of what you pay a 4-year law school for tuition for 4 years if they were still teaching this stuff, which they're not. I mean, nobody knows. And the good news for us is that all the people in official positions in government are so colossally ignorant that just a little bit of knowledge on your part, you can do what I did in my South Carolina case, where I shut the bastards down in 30 seconds flat after being hauled across the country for 2 months, 5 jails, 4 different federal unmarked military aircraft. And I got there, and I'm the one standing there, manacled hands and put in a red jail suit. And they read the charge, practicing law without a license. I laughed. And I said, the problem with that is I don't practice it, I get it right the first time. And then the judge, who I think was one of the good ones, wanted to say, well, we have to check you out and be sure that you're competent to represent yourself. If I could have thrown up my hands, I would have. I said, oh, here we go. Barfetta. Barfetta v. California, 422 U.S. 806. The problem with that is that the Supreme Court ruled in Barron v. Baltimore, 7 Peters 243, 1828, the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states. Stunned the whole courtroom into silence. This is $1 million video I would love to have, but they claim not to have made this in a court of record, for what that may be worth. And for the entire remainder of my vacation in Columbia, South Carolina, the DA didn't say 2 words to me, didn't have a clue. And they're dead right. But they knew they were beat. And, they didn't try to send me to a shrink and have me evaluated for my competence. Unfortunately, that went very well. I got a good one of those too. And there was no way after the first 3 minutes he could make any finding other than that I was competent to handle my own affairs, meaning I wasn't going to be muzzled by one of their state bar association attorneys. And that's what I want to teach you to be able to do. If they have to confront you, especially in front of a jury, there is no way that's going to happen. I haven't seen one. I'm probably never going to see one, and you won't either. They can't go there, leaving them to either dismiss the charges or, in my case, make a sweetheart plea bargain, which is a funny thing. It's a video for another day, but here I am back home, and I got here, and they lost. I mean, simple. And this is a big deal because, by the way, what I did, and it's a story for another video, but basically I was challenging what I call the malignant, malevolent monopoly of the state bar on the practice of law. And you have to know all these bastards, all these black robe bastards and prosecutors and attorneys would love to have put me away for a long time, but they weren't able to do it, were they? Knowledge is power. That's what I want to help teach you and help gain knowledge like this. You can teach your children, your posterity, and get a lot of us out there in sufficient numbers. They can't beat all of us, maybe not even a few. But that's the job I've taken on here. I've been in my 5th decade now, 15 years all in. And I realized that virtually no one else can do what I've done in that particular, especially with damage, and you have other considerations there. But I can teach you how to get around that and hold your ground, even though you can't take, the hard and fast positions that I do. There are still ways to deal with it. And it's so good. I'm going to be 73 later this year. My life is ahead of me. Damn, that's how good this is. They don't want you to know any kind of a feeling like that ever. But I hope you can see it in this video. I project that passion that I have and what I've learned. And if we start doing that all together and work together, by the way, too, Africans, Asians, and Americans, cut out this divide and conquer crap they've been doing for at least 150 years. Doesn't work. Civil rights, quote unquote, doesn't work. You'll learn the 14th Amendment doesn't exist. It was contemporaneously ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, which was not allowed to announce its opinion. And that, by the way, people, is what I think is the big change in the court at the end of the last term when they cited Cohen's v. Virginia, my favorite case, in support of. And what happened was that they denied Texas filing documents in the Supreme Court. And yet, Article 3, Section 2 says that, in all cases, ALL, in which the state is the party, the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. Now, the big deal here is that, if Texas can't file there, they don't have a court, do they? In what looks like a 2-justice dissent with Justices Alito and Thomas, they took exception to that. And the mainstream media caught wise to this too, but not the real issue behind the scenes. But if they're talking like that, and I think we have at least the 3 Trump appointees, possibly Roberts, the Chief Justice, and maybe even Breyer, who conspicuously did not retire. We have the makings there to go a long way in the next term of the court, which opens up early October. And we'll see where it goes from there, because once they start doing their job, which they haven't done for 150 years, and I'm going to be not so cheerfully reminding them of that fact, we can make progress in a lot of areas, especially with landlord tenant eviction BS. I mean, none of it exists. It's absolutely astounding. So, like I said, for more information, email me, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. I'll get the information back on what I do and how to do it. And you're going to love all of it. It's a whole new world out there once you understand the truth. That is to take notice, especially here in California, that all these corporate landlords and their political activities committees in Sac with Tomato have already gotten the assembly, in which we're not represented in either house, by the way. And even if we were, with 80 assembly members, the number figure unchanged from 1879, the ratio of representation here is 500,000 to 1. Nothing remotely resembling a Republican form of government guaranteed to the states by Article 4, Section 4. That said, what the Assembly has done is enact laws that, in effect, are going to set the landlords, in a situation where they don't hardly lose a dime for any of this quote unquote lost rent they were going to have. They'll either get it in tax credits, payouts, or who the hell knows what under the table. Not going to lose a dime. Why should they even have a right to go into one of their quote unquote courts and attempt to evict innocent people? You tell me. So that said, that's a hell of an affirmative defense, that they can just do that and with no loss at all. And yet, for the people that are waiting on the government to provide, funds like from the EDD here, the Employment Development Department, and all this federal BS that they've been holding up funds for months and months, you can't get them. And the reason they do that, by the way, is that just like social insecurity, which the 90 Part A, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Fleming v. Nestor, 363 U.S. 603, page 609, that there were no property rights associated with benefits pursuant to the Social Security system. They didn't say it quite that way, but that's exactly what they said. No right to benefits. They're privileges. That being the case, the government can do whatever they damn well want. They can do it with absolute immunity for any and all acts or omissions they commit. And it's that way across the board, not just limited to social insecurity. That's the thing we need to change most, and make these bastards in these official offices responsible pursuant to their oath of office to be bound by this Constitution and the laws enacted in pursuance thereof. Right now, it isn't that way. We got people waiting for months and months, and that would still be an affirmative defense, even in their corrupt courts, and even if they could define dollar. And since they can't, by the way, there's no valid common law contract now, is there? And California, like all other states, admitted prior to 1861, except Louisiana, was admitted as a common law state. What we don't have with the quote unquote landlord is a common law contract. That gets to be very interesting jurisdictionally speaking as well. And another reason for you to send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com, and I'll tell you what I have available here. You're going to love all of it. Modestly priced documents. And they're good across the board, by the way, not just with landlord tenant. This is traffic court, tax court, whatever it is you're in, criminal court. And people say, wait a minute, you're crazy. No, I'm not. One of the rare quotes I have not from the 90 parts comes from a case in the federal court where the judge, in dismissing a murder indictment, stated exactly this, that quote unquote, it is unfortunate that a murderer should go unwhipped of justice, but more unfortunate that a court without jurisdiction should exercise it. Where are these judges today? This, by the way, comes from Telly v. United States 140, Federal Reporter 899, page 905. You can look it up, or better yet, send me an email at youwinnincourt@gmail.com, and I'll send you a document that has quotes from this case right in it. And that's the way it should be. At one time, in an earlier era in the United States, that's the way it was. It sure as hell isn't that way these days, and it's our job, especially lawful de jure, just and Gwinnett State citizens, to stand up, invoke our rights, do our job, and get our republic back. Once we do that, and it won't be perfect, no one's saying it will be, but we can start from that premise and make changes consistent with the Constitution, not in contravention of it. Time for that bullshit to stop dead. I mean, all the corporations doing this, and that's the last thing we need is corporate interference with our lives. So sorry, I get a little huffy once in a while, but boy, just you can't believe the amount of anger I have over the course of 5 decades there. And you will too. The good news is that you learn to take this anger and apply it sparingly, especially with local officials that we deal with. They're going to be the big beneficiaries here if we get our local government back like we should have, and your county seat. They should want to be on the same side as we are, and we should want them to encourage them to do that. That's so much better, less expensive, more manageable. My God, it's astounding how good it is. So that said, with the quote unquote landlords, and they aren't not losing a dime here. I think that takes care of any possible evictions that they might try to attempt. I mean, you put this in timely, you demand a right to trial by jury, and you get all these legal issues that I can get you to a jury. And a jury, by the way, which will be competent to rule on the facts and the law. That's not what they want you to know. They don't want the jury to know it. And when you know with my packets, you get at the moment close to 600 jury instructions. Before the summer is over, it may be closer to 700, but the things I'm looking at now to integrate into there. But that's a lot of jury instructions. And trust me, that's where the real trouble comes, even in their corrupt courts. So that said, send me an email, youwinnincourt@gmail.com. I'll get you information out as to what I have and what I do. In the meantime, subscribe, like the videos, get the word out, tell your friends. The quicker we start working together here, the quicker we get these bastards off our back. Thank you.